All right, so let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the AAEM Women in Emergency Medicine section, the IMG student webinar mentoring series. Today, we're going to be discussing interview tips and tricks. Thank you for joining us. We have a great group of panelists with us. My name is Sarah Mistal. I am an emergency medicine physician. I am the assistant medical director. I am the counselor for the Women in Emergency Medicine section. I am also the chair of the ACCME subcommittee of AAEM. And I am going to stop sharing my screen so we can start seeing the panelists. And first, I'd like to introduce Alex, if you can introduce yourself.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So my name is Dr. Alexander Kutz. I'm a graduate of St. George's University. I work at Cooper, which is in Camden, New Jersey. I'm attending there in the emergency department and also one of the faculty for the Department of EMS. So we have a fellowship in EMS and then a residency in emergency medicine. So look forward to speaking a little bit about my experience as a former medical grad, and I want to just say thanks to Dr. Mistal for having me here. I'm very honored to have the opportunity to speak with you.
Thanks so much. And how about Jenya? You want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Jenya. I'm currently a second year emergency medicine resident at Nazareth Hospital, which is in Northeast Philadelphia. I'm originally from Belarus, but I did graduate from St. George's University prior to starting residency. And I'm glad to be here to be able to share some of the things I've gone through on my route into emergency medicine.
Thank you. And Ariel?
So hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining tonight. My name is Ariel Noble, and I am a PGY1 at the University of Mississippi Medical Center. I am also a St. George's graduate, very proud of that, and originally from Little Rock, Arkansas. And I thought I'd escape the South, and that here I am. So really excited to be joining. In addition, I am an RSA rep for the WIM sector of AAEM. So really happy to be here and to have this event tonight.
Awesome. I am also a graduate of St. George's University, so I'm an IMG as well. Just so you guys know, this is going to be, we're recording it right now, so this will go up on the website within 24 hours. Feel free to ask any questions in the chat. We do have some questions we'll go over, but we're happy to answer your questions as well. So this is going to be very informal, and I'm just going to start with a few questions. And since Ariel's kind of in my screen right now, you'll go first. And my first question is, we're well into the interview season, but when was the latest time that you kind of heard about an interview, or because you probably should have gotten some by now, but maybe not all?
Sorry, I was still muted. So that's a really good question. And I know it's one that gives a lot of people so much anxiety because interviews kind of trickled in for me. And then they came to, like a ramping up at the very end. So much so that I just, I'd gotten to the number I was comfortable at, and I was able to kind of say, I think I'm comfortable with this number and not accept anymore. And so at the beginning, they trickled in. I was really anxious about that. And so in November, I maybe had one every week. In December, I probably had one every day. And in January, again, probably at the beginning of January, I had a lot of interviews kind of at the beginning. So you'll still get interviews probably well into January, I would say. So do not fret if they're not coming at the very beginning. I definitely didn't hear about them maybe for the first 3 weeks or so after submitting my application, and I was hearing from other individuals that they'd gotten so many interviews, or I would read the online forums and be like, oh no, I'm just not getting interviews. But they just kind of trickled in, and then they will increase in number as the months kind of go on. And I had my very last interview in January, mid-January.
Thanks. What about you, Jenya? Was it a similar experience?
I would say so. Yeah, I definitely agree with the the number of interviews increasing towards the later side of the season. I definitely didn't start getting, during my cycle, most of the programs were not sending out invitations until ASAP or after ASAP had happened at that point. So I did not hear anything maybe for the first 3 to 4 weeks after submission, and then they slowly started trickling in. I had one rather late interview, I think it was my last one of the season, and that was in February, but that was the only one that had gone to that point. And I think the program had just merged their like ACGME accreditation. So it was kind of a later run for the program itself. But yeah, I would definitely say I got a bit more. At this point, I think I would have had a good number in the books, and then I got a lot more invitations during December.
And this is more for Alex now, who's doing a lot of interviewing. Have you guys sent out all the interview invites, or are you still working through that?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting now because this is our second year doing the virtual interviews, and we're still doing the same number. For the most part, they, you know, in our program, and this is highly program dependent, I think. In our program, for the most part, the invites have been sent out. But that, having said that, things often change during the interview season as people start to sort of reach a certain number. As Dr. Noble mentioned, you sort of reach a number that you're comfortable, and then you start declining interviews, and then people kind of get in off the waiting list. So thinking back a couple of years ago to when I was applying, there was definitely a lot, there's sort of like a first wave, a second wave, and then they kind of trickled in well into certainly January.
And I hear you guys mention this magical number of interviews. So what is the number that you felt comfortable to kind of stop interviewing at? And any one of you guys can take a stab at that.
I'll defer to the more recent applicants on this one.
Yeah, so there is a lot of controversy over this online, on the social medias that there are, and forums. And so even, the different organizations came out to make a statement on, maybe not courting interviews as we call it, but definitely as international medical graduates, we definitely want to be sure that we're accepting enough interviews so that we're competitive, especially in a field like emergency medicine. And so for me, I think the magic number that I'd been told traditionally, when I was getting ready to apply was like 10. You have to have 10 at least to match, in one place. I ended up taking a total of 17, which might sound, like a lot to some people, but that's what I was comfortable with given my own, portfolio, my own package, my own application that I was coming with. Someone else may feel comfortable at 10. They might feel like, I found the places. I know that I'm a shoe-in, possibly. Well, let's not say shoe-in, but I feel comfortable that I'll get in one of these places, and I found the places that are good for me. And someone else may not be comfortable until 20. But I know there's a lot of controversy over that, especially as we're in this interview season where there are a limited number of spots and interview spots, and there's so many applicants. But I'd say kind of an average of like 10 to 12-ish was what many organizations were recommending.
Yeah, I would echo that. That was kind of the number I was told as well. I believe all this, despite the fact that it was so not this long ago, I'm having a hard time remembering already. It feels like forever after you start residency. I believe I ended up interviewing I took 15, and that was the number I felt comfortable with. So what I was told was kind of 10 was the safer choice in terms of matching into emergency medicine or anything else for that matter. But I felt for me, and especially it was the places that I liked. So I interviewed there. So I felt comfortable at 15. So that's where I was. After that, I did not accept anymore. I just felt that it would be just a bit unfair to other applicants that were involved. And I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't do the virtual cycle, but I think we're pushing towards that and being more fair, for everybody that's in the process.
Thanks, guys. And Alex, what does a typical interview day look like at your program?
Well, it's it's pretty condensed from what it would be traditionally, and I think that's why some of these communications and statements and stuff have come out about not taking every interview, because you can do the interview from your house in the morning, and by like noon or 1 o'clock you're done and you have the rest of the day. So the prior the hurdle was like getting flights and hotels, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, but that's obvious. So for our interview day, we do, it's kind of like a Zoom breakout room. So they have breakout rooms for each like portion of the program. So there'll be like a breakout room with the program director, a breakout room with the associate program director. Myself and the rest of the faculty for EMS, we have a room, so they come to us for a certain period of time. And then they get kind of like shuffled around for like 15, 20, 30 minutes at a time. There's also, it starts with a sort of a virtual introduction to the hospital, to the area, those kind of things. And then the applicants in between each breakout room are in this kind of like lobby area where they can kind of talk with each other. And it's for me, it's like very unconventional, but I'm really impressed with how the applicants have dealt with it and really have come through pretty well and made the most of it. So we have, in addition to that, we have kind of a meet and greet kind of thing, which replaces the traditional, you used to go out to like for dinner and stuff and drinks and stuff with the program before. So now it's like kind of a virtual meet and greet that they kind of sprinkle those throughout the interview season. And that's a chance, that's the time that the applicants get to spend the most time with the residents and ask questions of the residents and things like that. And from what I've heard, even though it's the virtual platform, that things, there's a lot of good sort of interactions, a lot of good communication, and applicants tell me that they still can get a pretty good feel of the program, even not face to face, but even just through those kind of interactions and stuff like that. So I will say that our program puts a lot of effort into making the virtual interview, really kind of polished and try to make the experience positive for the applicants. So, because we're all kind of in this together. Like on my side of it, I would much rather be meeting everybody in person as well. So we're all kind of in the same boat. But we try to like really put our best foot forward with those. So.
And Ariel just went through this, so she has the most experience on the applicant side. Do you feel like you got a good understanding of what a program's like, and what the kind of nuances you probably would pick up in person through your virtual interviews?
I would say you lose and you gain something from this virtual interview season. So you do kind of lose kind of a sense of the place, of the location. You don't really know a feel of the place until you kind of step into that place physically. Thankfully, I chose the best place for me, and I'm really happy to be where I am. But I knew nothing about this city. I knew nothing about where I would live. I didn't choose where I'd live, until probably the very last minute. And so there's something about seeing the place and feeling it and knowing it feels like home for you. But what you gain also is kind of the virtual interview season allows you to relax a little bit, I guess, and be yourself. And I think that that's something that we maybe don't do as well in person. But if you're behind a computer screen, there's kind of that barrier that allows you to be your full self and just have a conversation with another human being without thinking about, everything about your surroundings, about other people being there. And because there's, it's virtual, takes kind of the edge off a little bit. So there are pros and cons. But ultimately, I think that, learning people's personalities and seeing kind of, getting a feel for them, even if it's not in person, what's a fit for you and what's not. So you'll pick up on those things and attend the socials for sure, so that the personalities of other people you'll be working with.
Awesome. So now let's get into kind of some of the nitty-gritty questions. And I'll start with you, Jenya. And the big question that I think we all get asked as an IMG is why a foreign medical school?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think pretty much every single one of my interviews had asked me that. I think the approach, at least I don't know what the best approach is, but the approach that I took was I was proud of where I went to school. I loved I loved Grenada, I loved going to SGU. It was a decision I made, so I saw no reason to kind of try to defend my choice, but rather embrace it. And so that's the path I took, and I just focused on the fact that I was excited about studying medicine in a different country, and also about the fact that the beach was my playground. Like it was a great time. So I would put it that way, and I basically just focused on the the aspects that made that experience what's the word I'm looking for, made it more fruitful for who I was to become as a physician going forward. So while I said that, that was my choice, and then I just went in terms of the fact that it just made me into who I was becoming as a resident.
And thank you, Ariel.
Yeah, I would say the same. And I think that if you have chosen to be an international medical student, one thing that I would say, often was, I talked about how close I was with my family and how tremendous a decision it was for me to move away from them just to pursue this goal. So I think that that's a strength, not a weakness. If you are willing to give up your home, everything for a lot of us, and move in pursuit of this goal, and knowing that there's kind of this whole stigma attached to it on the other side, and you make it through that, and you're this, close to the end, and you're, now nearing residency, there's something to be said about that. You work just as hard as anyone else. So yeah, I would just play that up in my interviews.
Yeah, and I think we all are very happy with the choices we made, and we all ended up where we should be. So you should definitely be okay with what school you went to. Alex, what are some common questions that you guys are asking these applicants?
You should have an answer prepared for what was a struggle that you faced, or what was a challenging moment for you. I'm seeing some heads nodding here. I certainly got those questions as well. For the most part, from my perspective, if you're getting an interview, then you're, the things that are on paper, and by that I mean board scores and transcripts and things like that, are already up to the level that we expect and that we would consider. So it's really important, and it's especially hard virtually to kind of not just blend in with the rest of the applicants and kind of just give like very sort of a vanilla kind of story to everything. I think, the two answers that were given about going to a foreign school are excellent. And I think they represent, two people who have done really well, and have, given the right answer to that question, because, for foreign medical grads, you will get that question as well. And, there's sort of, the good news is, if a school is interviewing you, or a program is interviewing you, then the fact that you went to a foreign medical school is not a deal breaker for them. So they've already considered you. They're not going to waste their time. But you should have, a compelling story to tell. And that's what I tell the applicants, is have some kind of a story. And for everyone, that's going to be different. So there's no one answer for that. But, what was that moment sort of for you, that the opportunity to go to a foreign medical school, that presented itself as the opportunity for you to get to where you want to be? What was the reason for that, and how have you made the most of that? And absolutely, as both the panelists mentioned, you want to spin it in a positive way. Nobody wants a mopey resident who's like, oh, I should have gone to another school, and this is the only place I get into, and I just struggled through. Nobody wants that. Like, I would hate to work with that person, because as an attending now, I have so much more perspective. Like, the biggest difference in my day is the residents I work with, right? I want to work with people who are engaged, driven, independent, and have something interesting to say. And so, I know that didn't totally answer your question, but another, question that we ask is a little bit about your personality. So you should have something prepared and, practice a little bit, something that makes you stand out a little bit different. So is that a personal experience you had that drove you to medicine? Is that like a fun hobby that you have that maybe you'll connect with one of the people that's interviewing you that you both love, like rock climbing or something like that? I know it sounds silly, but like those are the things that we remember when we're making the rank list, because all the other stuff, unless your boards are really high or really low, we're not really even going to mention them. So yeah, I hope that kind of answers your question. It's a little bit nebulous, but I think telling your story of where you got where you are is, you should absolutely emphasize that, like, look, I was looking for an opportunity to get where I want to go. I was willing to take that trip, right? I was willing to move abroad, leave everything, like all those things. That shows a lot, right? That shows a lot of initiative. It shows a lot of independence. And those are, if you look at it the right way, those are qualities that we really, really look for and make successful residents.
Yeah, thank you. And also, if it's on your application, be prepared to talk about it. Definitely. Anything is fair game. So even the smallest little thing, even if it's just one sentence, I know interviewers who would ask you questions about that. So getting to kind of the difficult questions, Ariel, what was the hardest question you got asked?
I think one that threw me for a loop and always does, and it shouldn't really be a hard question, but I don't think the interviewer likes my answers. It was really cookie cutter, as Dr. Cook mentioned. Don't have cookie cutter answers, but there was an interview in Ohio. I won't mention the place, but the interviewer asked me what I would do in kind of a dilemma where I caught my resident doing, or a fellow resident doing something that they shouldn't have been doing. And I gave like the team player answer, like I would just go talk to them. I would, take over and take one for the team, and I would take over and do their work. And he's like, well, that's not really, ethical or moral. It wasn't the answer he was looking for. He didn't like that answer. And so I think definitely think about challenging questions like that. What would you really do if you caught a resident doing something they shouldn't have been doing, or something that would hurt the entire team? What's your real answer? So really think through the challenging scenario questions, because a lot of the time we're giving like cookie cutter answers a lot of the time. Also, one thing that you just mentioned that is very true is anything on your CV is fair game, because I put my hobbies at the end, and it was like outdoors and reading books and things of that nature, really cliche things that everybody puts. And so I was asked on every single interview, what book are you reading right now? You like to read books. What book are you reading right now? Or you like movies? What's the best movie you've ever seen? And I had answers to those questions. I knew it was going to be asked them. And sometimes I was reading a book that, was kind of off the wall book that I had to explain in this interview, but it was an interesting thing to bring up to say, yeah, I'm reading this book right now, and it sounds really crazy. But it was something that I could tell the truth about, because I'm an actual, avid reader. So if you really don't do those things, don't put them in your CV, because you're going to be asked about it. I'm not going to put that I'm athletic, because I'm not. So don't put it in there. So yeah, that's my advice.
What about you, Jenya?
Again, absolutely agree regarding anything you put in your application. Please just be ready to talk about and not have a bland answer. The one quick thing, it's a bit of a hindsight there, but be specific in terms of your hobbies. So like if it is reading, it's that's awesome. The fact that you have all the everything you've been reading. Like for me, I think I put at that point I was weightlifting and whatever other things I would get into. So I had a lot of things that I put down. The weirdest question I was asked was what kind of tree I would be. And yeah, so I wasn't, that's not like, I've had a lot of jobs throughout undergrad so I've interviewed before. So I was kind of prepared for what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, which are kind of your typical sort of, regardless of the, specialty or even career choice, you will be asked in an interview. I've never been asked that. I did not have an answer to that. And so I was just honest about it. I was like, I wouldn't be a tree. It's just not something I would be. So I was like, I'm not picking one. I don't know that many trees. Like I'm not keen on the types of trees there are. So it'd be a really, like, it would be an answer that I'd be pulling out of nowhere. So I was like, I wouldn't be a tree. It sucks. You can't even move. Why? I just don't want to. So that was the one that I think was just tricky. But I think that because I went with my gut feeling about it, it made me more comfortable down the line in the interview journey, that made those, questions that I had to think about not seem as intimidating. Like I sat there and I thought, and I was like, I kind of had the option of giving the interviewer a response, which probably would have been made up, and versus just saying how I actually felt about the question or answering it. And which then allowed me time when I had, other questions that were a bit more, I guess, in line regarding that. I don't think I was asked anything like you were, Marielle, about like what I would do in the, like in a tricky situation in terms of my coworkers, but I was definitely asked, what I value in the people I work with. So I think so that those were mine. I think most of the questions were quite appropriate. I felt like people were gauging me as to how well we would work together, and that's really what and especially being now on this side when I have to like sit in on virtual meet and greets with applicants. I'm not looking for people who are going to be my colleagues, and so it's really important to kind of come off the right way.
A tree. Interesting. I don't know if I would have picked that program after that question. We do have a question in the chat that I think goes pretty well with where we are right now. It's from Margaret Ellen. It says, how can we gauge if the interview is going well? And if it isn't, any advice to pivot in the moment? And she says, thanks, everyone. Anyone want to take this? I think it's a really important question.
I can say from my perspective. So, in the in-person world, it was always like, oh, is the person like looking at the clock behind you or something like that? Like, are you winding down the minutes, right? Because that's always a problem. The funny thing is with the virtual, the time is kind of like set, so you're going to be with that person the whole time, no matter what, however painful it is. So I would say, if as best you can tell, if it seems like you're not getting a lot of feedback, right? If you're getting kind of like a glazed over look from the person interviewing you, if you feel like they're kind of zoning out, I can say from my perspective, it's kind of tough going like person to person to person. You really want to try to get the person that's interviewing you talking as well. So if you feel like you are talking and they are just kind of like staring at the screen, or even worse, I guess the worst thing, the equivalent of like checking the clock, it would be like if it looks like they open another window and they're like responding to emails or something, which I have never done, but I can't say that it's impossible. Is just break it up by asking them a question, like just anything, right? Get them talking. Try to find something that you can have like a little bit of back and forth, because if they ask you a question and you go on like this 20-minute thing, and they're just kind of staring, then that's just a recipe for you're going to go in the pile of like, who is that person again? Like, you don't want to be that applicant that just gets forgotten as soon as the call is over. So it's tough, and I really want to acknowledge that it's a challenge, especially virtually, to do that. So it's a skill that as I'm sure as you go through the interview process, and you'll probably get better at it. And everyone's been on Zoom for like 2 years almost now, so hopefully we're getting better at it. But that would be my advice, without an easy answer, but that would be my advice.
I think I had, during my interviews, I forget if it was an article I read or a podcast that I was listening to regarding interview skills at the time. And I think there was, regarding the back and forth and having a conversation with the person who's interviewing you, you're also interviewing to see if you're going to work well with, the program that you're going to match into. So both sides are important. They're both looking for kind of the same thing. So being mindful of that. But the podcast that I was listening to, was aiming at keeping the person who's talking to you interested, and people love talking about themselves. So it's just, that's something that's easy and comfortable. So their advice was to, if you're coming to a point where the questions are kind of at the end and there's not much more to really discuss in terms of a structured interview format, get to know the person who's talking to you. And one of the easiest ways is ask them why they're at the program. So like, what got them there? Because that brings, the person who's interviewing you, whether that be, maybe your next PD, maybe your next APD, that would tell them, they'll explain their journey to you. They'll let you know kind of how their steps took place. And then that gives you insight for them, but also allows the conversation to flow. So like how they got there and why they're staying, gives them the chance to chat and explain, how they got to where they are and what they love about the program. So it's I almost feel like those questions were a kind of win-win on both sides, because it kept the conversation flowing, but you also got a good amount of like a picture of who they were as people and how they got to where they were now. And, and as well as how they felt about the program itself, because then you could see if they were passionate and, excited to teach and love their residents, or, however else, or what maybe issues they thought were going on with the program that were being worked on, etc. Just felt like that was a good way to facilitate a more natural conversation than just expecting the person to ask you questions and then responding, which was a very, unidirectional sort of interaction.
I'd like to just add one other thing too, just echoing off of that. I'm amazed at how many people don't do this. You know ahead of time who you're going to interview with, right? You're getting interviewed a program. It's going to be the program director, one or both of the APDs, if there's two, chief resident, whatever. It's all on the website. What are their interests? What are their publications? I would recommend making just a little cheat sheet of the people that you're going to be interviewing with, of what their particular interests are. And that's a great point to pivot, right? If you feel like things aren't going so well, but you really want to kind of engage them a little bit, like, hey, I noticed this person has published like 10 papers on some particular ultrasound or some treatment or something, right? And even better if you have something that you can say about that as well. I really think doing just a little bit of research, and I get the feeling with the applicants that we're interviewing that some of them are kind of letting this go because it's Zoom and they're just kind of like, oh, whatever, I'll just log on and let it happen. But of course, if you're traveling there, like my routine was like, I'll travel there, I'll spend the night there at a hotel, and that night before the interview, I'm like on the website just refreshing myself on like what things that these people are doing and they're passionate about, because we all have our little like niches, like in academics, right? We're not just, everybody has their little point of interest. That's why we're doing what we're doing. So just a little bit of time, 20, 30 minutes or something, the night before your interview, just learn a little bit about them. And if there's something that you have even better that can connect with them, maybe you trained in the same place before, or maybe you have the same interest or something like that, that goes a long way.
Absolutely. We do have another question that kind of goes exactly with the next question I was going to ask. Navaz, I hope I'm saying that correctly. So I'm a non-US IMG at SGU, and how can I stand out as a non-US IMG that I will have, given that I will have US clinical experience? So I don't think any of us are non-US IMGs, unless, but maybe what kind of made you stand out in the interview day? Ariel, you want to take this first?
Yeah, so I definitely think unique experiences. So if you've had them, you've had them, and there's not a whole lot to do to change that. I mean, your application is in now, but definitely if you don't have them on your CV, try to think about some unique experiences that you've had. One thing that came up a lot was I listed a road trip experience that was turned into like a documentary. I did this when I was a grad student, and everyone asks about that. Okay, you listed this, it must be important. Why'd you do this? It was about women in STEM. And I talked about that experience. Or I talked about the fact that I used to be a college teacher before I became a med student. I taught science in college, or I talked about tutoring kids. So anything that you can talk about. I also worked in the ED for a really long time before I became a med student or a grad student or anything. So what are the experiences that led you kind of on this path, not only to medicine, but to specifically emergency medicine? And things about your life as well. What about your family dynamics? What about your upbringing led you to the place that you are now to pursue emergency medicine? I think they really want to hear about that. So just bring your unique life experiences, because we're not all the same. None of us all have the same story. So you have something unique to bring to that table. So review your CV, know it like the back of your hand, but also know some unique things that you can bring into the interview and say, hey, I did this. And this is how it directly translates into this interest.
How about you, Jenya?
I would have to agree with that. And keep in mind, some of the experiences that you have had that may shape your interview and make you stand out might not necessarily come on your CV. You have plenty of things you do in life that that shape you as a person and as a future physician that just don't have a title, they don't have a thing, it's just a story. So make sure you kind of have those stories, and don't try to be scripted when you tell them, but have certain ones that, like, you go to. As for example, I did, and I didn't realize it until I was actually interviewing, that I had spent a lot of time in various like teaching roles throughout my educational career. I was a teaching assistant when I was an undergrad, and then ended up being a DES facilitator when I was at SGU. And so that kind of slowly progressed and became a trend. So the one thing I pulled out of that is I would kind of explain what I would do during that, and how teaching is part of residency as well as learning. You can take both roles depending on what you do. And so I kind of brought that in to highlight the fact that I would do these things, but also that meant that this is kind of an educational setting I was comfortable in. So I kind of like to have a story behind a skill or behind something I wanted to highlight, which I found was the way to do it. You can't change the experiences you've had, but you can definitely look back and find things that are very personal to talk about. And there will be times where you're interviewing with a person that you just don't really connect with. That will happen, and like, it's okay. Like those are totally fine. It doesn't have to be awkward. You just have to go along with that and just let it happen. And those things are totally okay. There's going to be other interviews that just go off. You'll talk with, your interviewer. You could keep on talking after the time is gone. So, and those are the ones, you're like, okay, these are people I mesh with. These are people I vibe with. It seems like that they're good with me, and that might be more of a decision maker for you later. But I think people tend to remember stories a bit more. Board scores are easy to remember, but having like an experience you can share, people remember that. So I would definitely have quick little stories you can tell that let's say shape the your character, or that made you decide to go into med school, or made you decide to do or pursue XYZ that you're passionate about.
And Alex, as an interviewer, what kind of anything that stood out, or a great interviewee, or red flags that you identified?
Yeah, I think the biggest trend that I've seen, and this is going to echo a little bit or repeat a little bit what I said earlier, some of the people don't, for whatever reason, take the Zoom thing quite as seriously. And I want to let everybody know who's on this, who's watching this, that we do notice, and it does show. So please, dress like you would if you were going to an in-person interview. It only has to be from the waist up, but please do it. And the other thing that I've noticed is the rate of people writing follow-up correspondences, thank you emails, stuff like that is much lower than it was for the in-person interviews. And I'm not sure why. I don't know if it's because people, like, in the past would take a trip and we would give them lunch and stuff like that, so they would feel compelled to like write a thank you note or something. And because it's only like 3 hours or 4 hours on Zoom, they don't feel as much inclined to do that, but it does make a difference. And I think, that's one of the strengths of the foreign medical grad is we're used to hustling a little more. And I think it's one of our strengths. And so sending those follow-up, maybe there's, you could say something like, hey, that, we got cut off because it's, a Zoom thing and we got moved to the next room and there's one other question I had to ask, or just thank you for your time for the day. Like that stuff goes a long way. So those are the applicants that have stood out, is the ones that have done that. And those kind of things will bump you sort of up or down the list. And then the sort of red flags are the ones who don't really take it seriously. The way you're dressed, like, we'll understand if your dog jumps up on the couch or something, like that's okay. In fact, that might be something kind of fun. But like if it's obvious that like you have other plans today and you're just kind of like squeezing it in, it's not a good look. So make sure that your internet connection works. Make sure that the lights are on. I mean, I've had applicants who it's just like a silhouette of their, it's bizarre. It's those are things that like we all know at this point. There's no excuses. There's no like, oh, I'm new to like Zoom or anything like that. Like we expect you to put your best foot forward, because we're doing the same as a program, right? We're really putting a lot of work into it. We want to find the best people to fit our system and our program. So that would be kind of my biggest advice. And then try as best you can to just sort of be engaged, right? It's not, you're not just watching a lecture like you would on like any other thing, right? This is like you have to be interactive, you have to speak up or type something in the chat or something that gets on our radar.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to look like you're in witness protection, right? And I do think it's almost even more difficult on Zoom. You really have to be, I think, extra energetic and almost more engaged than maybe in person. So it does take a lot of effort. And for you, Ariel, what, I guess, positives and negatives from a program, like what were red flags for you from the interview, or something that really stood out in a positive way?
I will say, and this is so simple, red flags are always going to be people who are so uninterested in me that they didn't read about me beforehand. So if you come and you don't know anything about me, then I know that you're just kind of talking to us. And sometimes it's a blind interview, so you may not know anything about me, but also if you're not asking me questions, you kind of know when you're not connecting with someone and they're not interested in you. And that happened it happened during my interviews, and I just kind of had to either try to get them engaged or realize that the connection wasn't going to be made, and it happened a couple of times. So that's kind of a red flag. If I go to a social and the residents aren't really vibing and maybe they're bickering, they don't seem to get along, or they're just so tired they couldn't be bothered, maybe not the best flag. It's not the best look. Positive flags for me were going to interviews and feeling a warm welcome. So the morning started out with everyone on a high note. They were energized. We'd been doing this, everyone's doing this every day, but we all have to kind of bring our game face, each and every day to this interview thing. So they were energized, they were happy. Everyone chatted about not just, the interview process, but, about me as a person. Where are you from? Tell me about this. I looked at this in your CV. Can you tell me about that experience? Oh, you said that this about your dad in your personal statement. Can you tell me kind of how that affected you? Those personal things, asking me things like that and asking me personal questions about myself, so you're getting to know me rather than just treating me like one of a number. I think those are positive flags. So, and I even had programs that wrote me, little letters or emails to say, hey, it was great to meet you. Or I actually mixed you up with someone else on the interview panel, because that happened before too. There was myself and someone else, and they mixed me up, and the program director sent me an email after to say, hey, I really liked you. I'm so sorry I mixed you up. I said that you attended the University of Houston and you're actually from SGU, and I'm sorry about that, but I enjoyed talking with you. I really enjoyed that, person, sending me an email. It showed that they were actually interested in their participants, or the interview participants. So yeah, I think those are the red flags and the positive flags for me.
What about you, Jenya?
I think I would be pretty similar. I took a pretty similar approach. Granted, I had the in-person experience still. So for me, these socials with the residents were huge. I knew that, despite what, we're putting on a face and, kind of, we are a more polished version of ourselves for interview day. It's what it is. This is a profession. But I was always looking for co-residents that, you know, can you see these people potentially becoming your friends, like, or people that will have your back, people that seem happy, look happy, you know, have maybe similar interests. You know, how do they feel about the program? Does it seem like there are internal issues that are going on? So for me, that was really important. So like seeing resident interaction, how interested the current residents were was a huge thing. So if I saw anything that like you know, dwelled into what seemed to be kind of more of a toxic sort of situation, was definitely a huge turn off. So, but that was also, it was important from my end. I also wanted to have a group of people that, you know, I could vibe with really well, and that was important for me. So that's something I was looking for. Yeah, the personalized emails back were definitely a huge plus. I mean, it just feels nice. So those were definitely a positive touch. If there was any more concrete red flags for me, I had a lot of blind interviews. The ones that I had that were not, I don't recall having anyone that wasn't or at least wasn't straight up honest about the fact that like, hey, I was on shift last night, I didn't get a chance to look through your CV, which is absolutely okay, and we just ended up chatting. So that's what's really about it for me. It's mainly the resident dynamic, and then how, you know, how the faculty was relating to that as well.
Yeah. And I'm just kind of stealing Alex's story, but we went to the same residency program, and our program director would write handwritten notes to the applicants, and I mean, it really made a difference, that kind of touch. So I know Alex touched on this a little bit, but Tori had a question, and I think we can touch on it a little more. And it says, what is good post-interview etiquette in terms of contacting interviewers to say thank you? How should we go about it? How quickly after the interview? And thanks so much for volunteering your time. So Jenya, you want to kind of tackle that?
Sure. So at least from what I did, I kind of had a generic pre-written email format, which I would then personalize. I like, to me, it's kind of the way I do my MDMs, my notes now. It's just I had a structure, and then I would fill it in with, you know, what was different. So unless a program specifically, and I had a couple that did that, they were like, please just don't. Like they openly said, do not. And if they say that, if they go out of their way to say that, look, my email box is full, don't send me. Why am I going to do that to you? Like, we all hate spam. I don't want to do that. Like, that's too much. But so I definitely agree. Don't, if you have a template, personalize it. If you're going to send the email, don't send the same thing to all the people you were interviewed by. Like, they'll know, we know. It's, I just don't think sending it just for that doesn't really feel like, it just feels like you're checking a box as opposed to actually being thankful and actually being interested in that program. So that was my deal. If they said completely no, I'm like, you said no, that's totally fine. And if it was, it depended who the panel was. Typically, the programs that I liked and the people that I felt that I meshed and vibe with pretty well, or if I had questions for, I would definitely structure, but I try to keep it pretty brief, that, you know, it was lovely meeting you, etc. And like, if there was something specific that stood out in the conversation, then I would mention that in my thank you email. There was, I want to say there was like one interview I had that I actually was emailing a link to the person who interviewed me. I forget what it was about, but like, so stuff like that. But that means, you know, and you paid attention. You just need to be engaged. And I think it's definitely a lot trickier to do in this Zoom format. So that's what I would do. I would just keep it short. You don't need to write a book. Be honest with it. And if there was something that stood out in the conversation, or something that you were impressed by, or something that, that interested you, just mention it, because that way they know it's not, and it's also just takes more thoughts, and it takes more, involvement on your end, but it shows that you're actually interested and actually care.
What about you, Ariel? What'd you do?
Oh, Dr. Cook wouldn't like this. I didn't send emails. I'm so sorry. Because I will tell you why. I had the same idea as Jenya. I didn't want to overwhelm people with more emails. We are on Zoom all day. I know that lots of people were sending. So this was the first time I was a part of the first cohort of these this virtual interview season. So there was a lot of, please don't send emails. We know you guys are interested. We know you want to know about interviews, but there was a lot of overwhelming emails being sent just to request interviews. So I didn't also want to add to that by sending emails to everyone. I will say that I sent emails to 2 programs. The first was a program that I really enjoyed. I ended up matching there. I'm there now. And I just wanted to let them know that I really enjoyed their interview day. And the second was a program that I was interested in that I subsequently did not receive an interview, but I know that there's also this question probably towards the end. If it's not on the panel, someone else might ask it. What's the etiquette for sending emails to programs to show your interest, right? And so I don't feel like you should be emailing everyone to say, hey, I'm interested, will you give me an interview? I don't think that's good form. I think that, the community is so small that people know, that you're sending out emails here, there. And even if they don't know, it's still not the best thing, to do. So I did email one program that I really thought would be my dream program, and I wanted to hear back from them. But outside of that, I didn't send too many emails. I'm sorry, I didn't.
I
It's
think
okay.
that's okay.
I actually didn't send a single email. I hand wrote thank you notes to my programs. How like ancient does that make me sound? It wasn't that long ago. But I did send thank you notes. I would say the most important thing, okay, whether you write things or whether you don't, is that when there is that communication, maybe they email you, maybe you email them or whatever, maybe they want something from you, maybe they have a clarification, you really want to be prompt with your communication. I think there was a question about timing. If you are going to write them, I would write them within the week. One of the biggest headaches on the program leadership side is residents who can't handle the sort of administrative side of things, who are always falling behind on all these like really annoying tasks that we all have to do. And they only get more annoying once you're on my side, because now I'm responsible for others. So you really want to be, prompt with your responses if they do contact you. If you're going to contact them, don't do it like 2 months later. Be like, hey, that was a great interview day. They're going to be like, who is this, right? So you want to be punctual with your responses to stuff. And then with regards to interest, I think it's totally fine to reach out to programs. I completely agree. It's not you can't go to every program. But if there's 1 or 2 or maybe 3 programs that you're really interested for some specific reason, and you can say that specific reason, not like, hey, this is a great program, I'd love to be there, but like, we respond very well to like, hey, I have, like real life stuff. I have family in the area, or I really like this program because of this thing that, I don't know, it's going to be up to you to figure out what it is, but it has to be something that's not just like, hey, you're really highly rated and I would love to train there. Then I would absolutely encourage you to do that. And I think it goes along with the IMG hustle that we're all pretty good at by now. And then the last thing I'll say is there's a little bit of, controversy on telling places that you're ranking them number 1. My personal opinion is I would tell your number 1 that you're ranking them number 1, and I would do it as soon as you know that that's the case. Not in the middle of interview season where you have like 6 or 10 other places to go, but also not the day before, because they probably already had their faculty meeting. They've probably already made their list. That's my opinion. Okay. Cause I think if I would want my number 1 place to know that I have them number 1, but you can only do that for 1 program. and I would suggest doing that, as soon as you think it's appropriate.
Well, we're kind of wrapping up. So if anyone has any last minute questions, feel free to put that in the chat. And while we're waiting for those, if anyone wants to give some last remarks, anyone want to go first?
Sure, I can go. Last remarks in terms of entry season. It's stressful, but try to have fun with it. You're also looking for a place, like I know, and especially in like the more competitive specialties that we all stress out about matching into. I mean, it's a huge deal with what we're doing. Try to keep your sanity, whatever your outlet is, handle that, and please do that. And the only other thing I would say is try to have fun with it. You're also looking for a place you're going to work. You know, this is not the end all. So like, it'll all be okay. Just work, do what you need to do, and you know, go from there. Have fun with the interview season. That's really it.
Ariel?
I was just reading this other question. But yeah, so I think that those are definitely my closing remarks as well, Jenya. I just think that we put a lot of pressure on ourselves and we forget that we're also kind of interviewing these places. So just know that if they're interviewing you, as Dr. Cook mentioned earlier, then they probably are interested in you at some level anyway. So also go there prepared to ask questions. There is a really good list online. I forget which organization has this list of questions to ask residents, to ask faculty, to ask program directors. Go look at that list and have questions ready for them too, because you also want to know that you want to be at that place. You don't want to end up somewhere just because they're highly rated, or, you know, for these, you want to end up somewhere that is a good home for you. So definitely be interviewing them back and have fun and enjoy yourself. And I just wish you all the very, very best, and you will end up where you're supposed to be. That is so cliche, I know it, but you will end up where you're supposed to be, and all things will work out. So.
Yeah, that's a great perspective, and I think you're conditioned from so early on in your training, and especially as a IMG. You probably had a lot of people tell you like, oh, I don't know if it's going to work out for you. I mean, we've all heard that. I certainly did. So I just want you to remember that. And there's a question about, not if you haven't found the right fit or something like that. The goal is to get a spot, right? But that doesn't mean that's the end. It really is sort of the beginning. I think I can certainly speak from my perspective about all the things that happened to me after matching, and it's gone. There's been a lot of things that have changed, some unexpected, but once you're in that community, it's kind of on you. Emergency medicine is a very small community, so use the interview as an opportunity to make the best impression on everybody. There's going to be places. I'll give you an example. We hire people at Cooper as attendings or as fellows, and we go back and we look at their notes from when they applied as a med student. And we can say, like, they didn't come here, but hey, we really liked them then. We'll probably like them now. This is just the beginning of what is hopefully a very long and rewarding career for all of you. So it's a great opportunity to meet a lot of the people and we're all moving around to different hospitals all the time. Like it's very, very close knit community that way. So have a positive outlook, and just remember that once you match, kind of the clock kind of resets, and then it's up to you to kind of make the most out of whatever wherever you wind up, and a lot of things can happen. And if you work hard and sort of make the most out of everything, that's going to reflect really well on you.
Thank you guys so much for your time and sharing your wisdom and giving us a great discussion. I think we answered most of the questions. There's just one. Does anyone think we're going to go back to in-person interviews anytime soon? And I don't know. I honestly don't know. I am sorry if we didn't get to everybody, but I really appreciate everyone coming out and participating. We have a survey, if you guys wouldn't mind taking it, just to see how we did, if you want anything to change, any recommendations. Kathy, do you have the link? I'm having trouble finding it. Can you put it in the chat? Otherwise, we will send it out to the participants. Okay, it's coming soon. Awesome. So I just really want to say thank you again for everybody's time. It was an awesome discussion. I know we're all really busy. Please take a time to fill out that form and have a good night, everyone.